Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so excited that you guys are listening today. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. Hey, if this is your first time listening, I just want to remind you that the end of every episode is the kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. So be sure to stick around and listen for those. They're a lot of fun. Well, I am so excited that it's the first day in October, and I looked it up online, and everything online is true. So I found out that October 1st is actually quite a few holidays celebrated. Like, for example, October 1st is National Black Dog Day. So if you have a dog that's black, it's your holiday. It's also National Pumpkin Spice Day. So celebrations for that for me. I need to go and get me a latte, I think. It's also National Fruit at Work Day. So if you don't take fruit to work on normal days, I think today is a good day to do that. It's National Taco Day, which is the first Tuesday in October. I mean, in my family, everything is Taco Day. We love tacos. My favorite, though, is today is National Homemade Cookies Day. So I cannot think of better ways to celebrate October 1st than to make some homemade cookies, have a pumpkin spice latte, enjoy an apple at your job, and have a taco with your black dog. Sounds fun to me. Lots of fun options. Well, today is a very special conversation, especially if you are a family that has someone in middle school or heading to middle school in a few years. I am really excited to introduce you to our guest for today. Her name is Ashley Bohinc, and she has dedicated the last 20 years to serving the next generation in educational, athletic, and ministry settings. Ashley Bohinc serves as the founder and CEO of Make It Middle School, where she is determined to help people create more meaningful resources, programs, and experiences for middle schoolers in both churches and school systems. Ashley is a sought-after speaker, coach, consultant, creator, and evangelist who is known for her energy, passion, and authenticity when it comes to making a difference in the next generation. Ashley also serves as the executive director of Carry 117, a ministry based in Ethiopia that focuses on orphan prevention and family preservation through empowering women. When she's not trying to change lives or change the world, you'll find Ashley working in her garden, traveling, or unpacking the meaning behind the latest Taylor Swift lyrics. If you have a middle schooler or are approaching the age of middle school, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with my friend, Ashley Bohinc. Well, Ashley, I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, this is so fun. We were just talking earlier, I know of you. We've passed each other in many different conferences and things like that. Would you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I am Ashley, and for the last 20 plus years have been working with preteen, middle school, and high school students in first the education setting, meaning I was a teacher in the public schools.
Nice.
And I taught your favorite subject, health education. And then I coached high school varsity soccer and middle school club soccer for many years. And then I transitioned over into being a middle school pastor at two different churches, and then worked at a publishing company where I led our middle school department and created resources, curriculum, and resources for anyone who works with the next generation, parents, volunteers, ministry leaders. And now I I also have a nonprofit in Ethiopia that I love so much and travel there so often. I love having my hand in a lot of things, but I am more convinced than ever that this next generation is going to be the generation that changes things in this world. And I'm here for it.
Yeah. And I love that you work with middle schoolers and that your whole life has been really about encouraging and supporting middle schoolers and middle schooler families. So a lot of families right now, their ears have perked up because they heard middle school and they know that that's coming, or maybe they're already in that season. So they're excited to hear from you today. Okay, before we get into your story, because this is a show for kids, I always ask my guests to tell me a joke. So do you have a joke for us today?
Okay, in the spirit of former teacher.
Okay.
Why did the math book look sad?
Oh, I don't know. Why did the math book look sad?
Because it had too many problems.
That's true.
It's true.
It is true. It has a lot of problems. Yeah, math was not my favorite subject.
I liked it because there was like an actual answer. Like,
okay,
I could tell if I won or not by get the answer right.
Right.
I remember, like the time test in the 1 minute test, you have to do like all the multiplication.
Yeah.
I was that annoying kid who raced to the front, slammed my paper down so I could be first done.
Yeah. Well, that's the competitive part of you. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I love a good math joke. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about, first I want to hear about your nonprofit in Ethiopia. How did that get started?
Well, because I have an undergrad degree in health education, my actually favorite class I ever took in my undergrad degree, it was an entire semester study on HIV/AIDS and the pandemic that happened. And I learned about how that pandemic wiped out an entire generation of parents on the African continent. And that's how one of the reasons the orphan crisis happened. And I wanted to learn more about it. And as a health teacher, I taught units on HIV/AIDS and communicable and non-communicable diseases. And that was actually the first thing that made me interested in going and serving abroad. And when I went for the first time in 2010, I met some incredible leaders in Ethiopia, Ethiopians, who were doing so much like amazing work and change in their own communities. And they had hearts and visions for ministries. And I was like, well, I'll come alongside you. Like, I love that. I love that you want to start an empowerment program to help keep families together, to help women support their children, send their own children to school, put food on the table, put a roof over their house. And so I voluntarily lead the whole U.S. side of the organization. It's fully owned and operated by Ethiopians, and I take teams of people over there. I take parent-kid duos over, and I really love it. We go serve, and yeah, there's ways to get involved on this side of the water and ways to get involved on the other side of the water.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of change. Like, change is coming. The leaves are changing on the trees outside, and I think that just reminds us of how much our lives change from season to season. We just finished summer. We were just laying out by the pool, and now we're in the middle of school year with all the sports and all the activities. And I don't know, I think sometimes it's easy for us to move into this season of change, and sometimes it's not. So will you talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, if there's one word or phrase that I would use to describe this season of development, it would be change. You know, moving into middle school or starting middle school, I think there is so much change in the next few years ahead. And that can be thrilling for some people, and that can be absolutely terrifying for others. Like, I know for me, I love change, but I don't love to be surprised by change.
Right.
And I have friends and family members who do not like change. They like things to be the exact same way that they've always been because it's predictable. And I understand that. Like, there's a whole spectrum of where people fall being comfortable with change. In fact, that's a conversation you should have with your family in the car, is how comfortable on a scale of 1 to 10 are you with change? Because I bet you would be all over the map. But what I've learned after 20 plus years is not only does your body start changing when it comes to, the changes that happen during puberty in middle school, but your friendships might start changing a lot. You start changing classes. Your interests might start changing. The way that you think about things or your opinion on things might change. Your friendships for sure will change. And sometimes that's on purpose. Sometimes it's just because you don't have lunch period together anymore, or you don't share any classes, so you don't see them as often. And so I think one thing I always say to anyone entering middle school and to any parent entering the middle school phase is be ready for change and have a family plan for when change happens. How do you talk about change? How do you talk about or wave the flag that you're having some trouble with a change? How do you process hard change or change that doesn't feel good? How do you celebrate great change? Because I think when we expect it, we aren't caught off guard when change happens, and we're able to respond to it in a way that we feel proud of, in a way that we've had time to process this and prepare for it. And so I really think that preparing for a season of change is really important for families to do together, for people to open those conversations.
A good way to think about it too is to prepare for it, because we know it's coming, whether we want it to or not. So what are some things that we can do as a family to prepare for that? I love that you said that, like, first of all, having those conversations, but what are some ways that we can think through these scenarios that might come up? Because we don't want to get so caught up in the what ifs also, right?
Totally. I think it would be cool. Like, I know every family dynamic has a different way of communicating, and sometimes like making jokes about things and joking about things makes it easier to talk about something hard. Sometimes it makes it harder to talk about something hard. So I think it would be really important, like as you're looking at what the next few years look like, if you want to have a conversation and you don't know how to have the conversation, maybe there's like a word or a phrase your family comes up with, and it's like, it's almost like giving everybody the heads up, like, hey, I have something we need to talk about, but I don't know how to talk about it. So I'm just going to tell everybody that up front. So I don't know, like maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a quote from a movie. Maybe it's an accent that you use to say it in. And whatever your family does as your inside jokes, like I think that would be important to have like a word or a phrase that you can say when you're like, or text, whatever it is, to tell the family that you have a change you're navigating and you're trying to find out how you feel about it and what you think about it, or even what questions to ask about it. And like, is this a normal change, or am I the only one on the planet that's feeling this way? Because I think a lot of times when we go through change, we think we're the only parent feeling that way, or we're the only 11-year-old feeling that way. And the truth is we're all human. Like we've all walked through these things, and just happens to be we walk through them at different times. And I think if we can open the doors to those conversations, the change actually becomes a place we can grow a lot. Like you mentioned, Christen, if you live in a place where you get to see the beautiful fall leaves changing right now, there's something about their change that's absolutely beautiful. It makes us slow down in the car, or look up on a walk at a tree, or take a picture, and takes our breath away, or want to go chase these beautiful leaves that are falling from the sky. There's something beautiful about it, even though it's hard.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm thinking of like my kids are in middle school now, and I feel like there are times where I don't want to like overwhelm my kids, especially when they're like getting ready to go into that phase. I don't want to ask a ton of questions because they're like, Mom, chill out, you know. But also, I think the best conversations that we've had are when I talk about my experiences with that scenario or with that type of change, and letting them know, like, yeah, I've walked through this before. This is what I dealt with. These are the emotions that I felt. I think that's always something that we forget. And in our parent arsenal bag of things to help is we forget that we have gone through this before. And so spending some time maybe thinking through what that was like for us, whether it was good or bad, you could still share that with your kids and kind of give them insight into how you deal with things like that.
I love that. It makes you more human as a parent to your kid when you do that. And I know there are situations where maybe your preteen or middle schooler feels like you just don't understand. and maybe that's the case, but it's really important to have that type of a conversation. I love the idea of experience sharing. I love the idea of even a parent asking their preteen or middle schooler, like, what are 3 questions that you would be totally fine with me asking when you get home from school every day? Give me ideas of what those questions are. That way they have choice in what you're asking about.
Yeah.
Or you can tell them like, hey, every day when you get home, I'm going to ask these questions. here are different, you can tell me about what you learned in class. You can tell me about what you talked about with your friends or on the bus or at recess or whatever. But I just want you to know I'm going to ask these questions just because I want to know about your life. And I want to know as you're navigating these changes. Maybe one of the questions is, I'm going to ask you every week or every day, was there anything that happened today that made you laugh really hard?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that happened today that made you sad or that you're still thinking about? Whether it was something somebody said about you, to you, or you overheard, or a way they looked at you or something like that. Because it really helps you have those hard conversations. If during change, it's sometimes we're not great at asking for help, or we have these feelings associated with change. We feel insecure. We feel lonely. We feel angry. We feel frustrated. And so a lot of times when somebody asks us about it, we have an outpour of those emotions before we can even get to what's causing it. And so I think setting the tone for change is going to happen. How do we want to talk about it? If we need to have a hard conversation, where's your favorite place to talk? Is it shoulder to shoulder in the car on a drive? Is it out in nature on a walk together? Is it sitting face to face having a frappuccino? Is it getting ice cream? Is it walking the dog? What is our thing going to be?
Mm-hmm.
That when we need to have some of those conversations about change, where do we want to do that? And create almost like a safe place for those conversations to happen.
Yeah. And it's important for parents to spend most of the time listening more than giving advice and trying to solve the problems, because I think that's a big thing for change for parents going through this, is recognizing this transition from they were little kids and now they're getting bigger and they're getting older and they're getting more independent. And we want to continue to foster that in a good way. And so one way is definitely to listen.
I love that.
One of the big things that I know a lot of kids are dealing with or nervous about as they're transitioning, like maybe they have to go to a new school or they're going to be in a different area that they're not used to or whatever, is just that whole, they have this solid group of friends, and friendships change so much throughout our whole lives, but that's hard to imagine the older you get. So would you talk a little bit about that change, like how kids can help prepare themselves for their friendships changing and how they can build some really good friendships? We'll be right back after this. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
Yeah, and I think the idea of friendships changing can feel overwhelming because we all really value our friends, and your friends matter a lot and you want to be included in things. I totally understand. I remember feeling that way, and I have those conversations on a weekly basis with students. But I would say friendships change because interests change. So you might be really interested in Play-Doh, and then all of a sudden you decide, well, I actually really love graphic design instead. It's still, you're in the art space, but you decide instead of building things with Play-Doh or dough of some kind, you're changing to graphic artists. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with your friend saying, no, I still want to play with Play-Doh. I don't want to do graphic design. That's totally fine. It's just as you start to, get better at that interest, you still have things in common, but you're not working on the same thing anymore. So what happens is then you start to find other friends who like graphic design and other friends who like Play-Doh, and you start to spend time with them as well. And just because you drift apart in a friendship doesn't mean you don't like each other. It doesn't mean you can't be for each other. Just because you're not in the same classes doesn't mean you can't hang out outside of school,
Right.
although that might happen. And Sometimes friendships need to change because you need to make them change, because maybe they're not being the best influence on you, or maybe you're not being a great influence on them, or maybe you need a different kind of support in a season. You can choose to change friendships, and sometimes friendships change without you choosing them to. And both of them are okay. And you can do that well by making sure you're listening to yourself and honoring yourself in it, and you're honoring them. And it's especially important as those friendships change that you communicate with them if you can, but you always think about, how do I want them to talk about me when I'm not there? Because that's how probably the filter you should think about. How should I talk about them when they're not here anymore in this class or at this lunch period or on this team?
Right.
So I think it's actually beautiful. I think about who I was friends with in elementary school and who I was friends with in the beginning of middle school, end of middle school, and high school when it was soccer season during high school, and then it was basketball season during high school, and I was closer with friends who played soccer with me during soccer season, then closer with basketball friends when it was basketball season. And then as I think through my life, there are friends that were there for a season of life, and I'm so grateful for them. They taught me so much. They helped me become a better version of myself. And then they moved on, and God brought other people into their life, and I'm cheering them on from a distance, and I'm grateful for that. And then there are friends, just a couple, that I can see woven through a lot of seasons of my life. And I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Just being open-handed and not gripping onto friendships. And who did God put in my class this year? Who did God put on the bus? I moved to a new town. Who are my new neighbors? Maybe I can make new friends who are going to bring out something in me that I have never seen in myself yet. And so I think it can actually be a really exciting thing, even when it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you go through it, just to keep in mind, my mom used to always say to us, friends will come and go, but your family is always your family. And so it was really an important thing for us to lean into our relationship with our family members, our siblings, our cousins, because those are people that you're always going to be tied to in some way. And as you go through those changes, it's good to have that anchor of good family, or even if your family is a chosen family, your church group or people that you grew up with in your neighborhood, it's still really important to foster and to take care of those relationships. So
totally. I agree. My siblings and I, there's 4 of us, we're all 14 months apart.
Oh,
so
wow.
We all were 1 grade apart in school. And I'm so grateful for that, because I know that can be hard to have siblings that close in age to you.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really cool because I feel like we all kind of were going through the change together. And we had, like you said, built-in besties that we could lean on. And when everything else around us was changing, our family unit, for us, thankfully, it was a steady thing. I know that's not true for everybody.
Right.
It's not true for every family. There might be a lot of change happening in your family. Maybe your siblings are older and they're going away to school, to college for the first time, or they've moved out and they got married, or maybe you're blending families, and all of that can be beautiful. All change, you can look for the good and for the lessons and how it's sharpened you, and it's an opportunity for you to grow.
Absolutely. That's good. I think another thing when I think of change is that there are some people that, you mentioned this before, that have kind of a fear of things changing, that fear of the unknown, or fear of, what if I don't do well? What if it doesn't work out? What if I don't make any friends? What if all of this, just my whole life falls apart? So what would you say to those people that are maybe facing some fears when it comes to changing?
Oh, such a good question. I'll say it's normal. Even people who like change probably experience some fear. I even remember watching some interviews with the U.S. women's gymnastics team at the Olympics, and they're talking about they're excited to be there, but they also are nervous, or they feel fear, even though they've been practicing this and they've been doing this. So I think fear in general is a human experience. And I would say the fear of the unknown, I totally understand. I think as I've gotten older, I'm starting to learn everything's really the unknown, and we really don't have as much control as we think we have when we think we have it.
Right.
And I think just the expectation of, well, I'm going to try it. It may not go well. We'll see. If it doesn't go well, I'll either laugh at myself or I'll pick myself up and we'll try it a different way. And I think just like playing that out in your head instead of like ruminating and thinking like, what if this doesn't go? What if I'm bad at this? What if I, what if, but play out like,
Right.
okay, what if I try out for this team and I don't make it? Okay, that's not the end of the world. If I don't try out for this, if I try out for this team and I don't make it, then I will go try this or I'll try that, so playing it out in your head so that the fear isn't what's controlling you. You are actually moving forward regardless of what the outcome is.
Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of, Inside Out too, where like the new anxiety, another great movie. But when anxiety shows up, she has like all the luggage, and I'm like, that's true, because it brings so much where we think like, I'm not gonna be able to deal with this. But if we kind of let it play out, and sometimes that helps. I think if you do struggle with anxiety, it's good to have that trusted friend or adult that can help you process those feelings. Because the more we talk about those things and put them out there, they're not ruminating in our mind and our heart, and we're not alone in that. We can have someone else to say, okay, I know you think that might be true, but actually this is what's true, or this is what's going to happen. And so, so really having that friend or someone that we can help to process those things will help with that fear of change. Cause that is a real thing for sure.
Yeah. And focusing on like what doesn't change, even in the fear of change, like that you matter, that God is good, that God promises to be with you, that you were created for a purpose and with a purpose, that you have a family who supports you and is for you, that you have goals, like the things that aren't necessarily changing, even if you have this fear that everything is changing. It's important to remind yourself of that, because even in the midst of change, remember God promises to be with us in it. Not that change won't happen, but then when we go through it, we can go through it with God in a relationship.
Right. And I think too, we forget too that God is still in control, and maybe it was his plan for us to go through that change for our good.
Yeah,
and so when we trust in who God is, we may not know what he's doing, but we can trust in who he is and that he has better plans than we do. That's one of my favorite Bible verses, by the way, is that, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are better than our ways. And so just leaning into that knowledge that we know that God's stuff is better than our stuff. So we just need to trust in him.
Totally. And even as an adult, like there are things that I go through that I'm like, okay, God, like I do not understand this. I do not understand why this has to be hard. My feelings feel hurt. I can't see how you're going to make something great out of this, but okay, I'm just going to trust that you're good and that you see a way bigger picture than I do. Right. And, there are still some things I'm trying to see what God is doing with that, or why that piece was moved in my life, or something like that. So I think it's a skill we need to learn for our whole life, not just for middle school.
That is so true. Well, Ashley, this has been so great. I've loved getting to talk to you today. And I know that there's a lot of people that will really appreciate your insights on middle schoolers, especially. So for those families that want to find out more about you, where can they go to follow you and find you?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media platforms. Instagram is the one that I use mainly. So it's at Ashley Marie Bohinc. We can drop that probably in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Or my website, ashleybohinc.com. Reach out, DM me, email me, contact, whatever. I would love to hear from you.
Yeah. And you had a book that came out a little while ago called Communicating to Middle Schoolers. Is that what it is?
Yes.
And it's for church leaders and people that work with middle schoolers. But you said you've had a lot of parents that have enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I didn't see that coming, to be honest. But it makes total sense. It was originally written for people who, are teachers in a classroom, or, lead a small group, or they teach students from the front of the room. But so many of the principles translate to parenting as well in the faith. So I talk a lot about knowing middle schoolers developmentally and knowing them culturally. And here are some techniques to try when you're trying to engage a middle schooler in a conversation. And after it went live 2 years ago, the book, so many parents reached out to me and said, I know this wasn't written for me, but it was so helpful for me as a parent of a middle schooler. And I was like, I'm like, maybe I need to make a parent version. I don't know. But that's really cool. That surprised me. I didn't see that coming. And I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's so good for just a resource for anybody that comes in contact with a middle schooler, is just helping to learn and to learn to better communicate in general is a great thing. So you guys definitely go check out Ashley's book. All right. So before I let you go, I always ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So do you have a memory you want to share from your childhood?
Oh my gosh. It's funny you ask this. Somebody the other day asked me what was one of my favorite memories from my teenage years. And the first thing that came to mind was, how like parents have the like bring your child to work with you day. And so you get a chance to go like shadow your parent in their profession or their job. Well, we did a bring your parent to basketball practice day. And I don't think I have laughed so hard in my entire life. Like, I have this shared experience. My sister was on the team, and then we brought our mom. And if you've never brought your mom to basketball practice and who has no training in basketball and watched her play defense and try to do a layup or passing drills, and everybody brought their parent. And so the parents were laughing. We were laughing. The coaches were crying, laughing. It was the most beautiful shared experience, like total chaos in the best way.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful for it because I literally texted my mom and my sister. I said, Mom, remember when we brought you to basketball practice? And she's like, and I was the star? I'm like, sure. If you think so. Well, what was great about it was like everybody's parent was making a fool of themselves trying to keep up with us. And we got a chance to have this shared experience during what could be a pretty tumultuous time. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, I love that. My son's team, their coaches would always do that after baseball, like the last practice of the season. They would invite the parents to come out, and it was kids against parents. And so we're all coming out there kind of reluctantly. And my son went up to bat and he hit the ball and it went square to me. And I put my hand out and it was like miraculous. Like I put my hand out and I caught the ball and I got my son out, and like mad respect from all the parents and the coaches. My son was like, Mom.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
So I remind him of that often. Remember that time that I caught the ball that you hit, right? He's like, thanks a lot.
Amazing.
Thank you. I don't win a lot in parenting, but that was a win for sure.
It totally was a win. To any parent listening, you should organize a bring your parent to practice day with your kids' team or whatever.
Yes. It will go over very well, and it'll be a memory seared in their brains for sure. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was so fun getting to talk to you.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you guys are doing, and good luck to all of you who are entering middle school, parenting middle school. It's going to be awesome.
Wow, I am so glad I got to talk to Ashley today. She shared some great ideas, like to start the conversation with each member of your family at some point about how they feel about change in general, because I think that's good for you to have that perspective of everyone in your family and be ready for change and have a family plan when it happens. We all know that change is going to happen. It's going to happen in different phases of life. What's most important is how we respond to it. I love when she was talking about friendships and reminded us that friendships are going to change too. And that's okay for relationships to change or sometimes drift apart because your interest or location changes. But it's especially important to be open-handed with those relationships and embrace new friendships that come into your life. And she reminded us when you are facing that fear of change, she said, focus on what is true. God is with you. He's for you. He loves you. And you have people that love you and support you in your life that are going to help you get through it. And you never know, change could be a good thing in your life. If you'd like to learn more about Ashley, I encourage you to go to her website, ashleybohinc.com. You can also follow her on Instagram and definitely check out her book, Communicating to Middle Schoolers. If you are someone who works with middle schoolers or you have middle schoolers coming soon into your family, that would be such a great resource to have. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend Presley.
Why did they not play cards on the ark? Because Noah was standing on the deck.
he was standing on the deck. That's a good one. I like that. Thank you, Presley. Hey, if you guys would like to be on the show just like Presley was and share your favorite joke or maybe a song or your favorite Bible verse, just head over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the tab at the top that says Kids Only. You can record it right there, or you can send me a video through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod, and you can just send me a DM with your video of you sharing your favorite joke or whatever you want to share. And speaking of social media, I'd love for you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and share today's episode with someone who might need to hear it. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Collide Kids Podcast YouTube channel. That's pretty easy to remember, where you can watch the full-length interview for today's episode. You know, a great way to support the podcast is to leave a rating and a review on your podcast app. When you do that, it really does help other people find out about the show. And I really do love reading those and hearing what you think. You can also support the podcast by heading over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the link at the top that says support. And anytime you think about it, I always appreciate your prayer support as well. Well, I hope you guys have a fantastic October 1st and get to celebrate in some fun way. And in case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids Podcast.